Introduce to you Dr. Ariel Pelcano. You're
Thank
on.
you so much. All right, great. Thank you so much, Susan. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I think we're good. Okay, great. Thank you. And you're right. You're absolutely right. This is the master place, is the brain. So tonight we're going to be talking about optimizing brain health. And if you're new to the Quantum Infinity community, or if you're here for the very first time, I want to warmly welcome you to what I think is one of the most amazing and dynamic technologies we could enjoy and have fun with and do some real healing with. So my goal really as a naturopathic physician, or I'd say my mission, has been made a lot easier by the Quantum Infinity because my real goal was to empower you, to empower people to heal themselves. And the Quantum Infinity is this type of an empowerment tool. It allows you to inquire about your own health, to gain personal feedback, and to then balance your own energy field. So it's not only empowering, but it's also super fun. We're curious beings. We want to know the truth. We want to discover what's going on with us in order to make the appropriate changes, to adapt, and to become better. Our natural state is to feel well. Our natural state is to thrive. And the Quantum Infinity is this bridge to our own natural ability to heal and balance ourselves. It's so exciting. That's why I love to teach classes in Quantum Infinity and natural medicine. You see, the custom category feature of the Quantum Infinity allows you to investigate further. And if you can understand some cognitive information in natural medicine, then those can become the pieces you can add on about the brain and brain anatomy, or about your adrenals, or about your thyroid. You can add them into those custom categories and then do an amazing investigation and balancing. My classes sort of marry and bring together the best of natural medicine and the best of biofeedback. And I want to share with you guys a cutting edge, amazing concept that we have discovered. I'm going to mention a couple more times tonight, is the power of positivity. So in our strategy sessions, we've been using more positive energy, like the solfeggio frequencies, with everything we want to balance. If we want to balance the brain, we put in solfeggios, or we put in affirmations, or we put in positive words. So that is a little bit about the wonderful Quantum Infinity and some of the things that you can do. Let's go to the next slide and get started talking a little bit about the brain, and I'll elaborate a little bit more about the concepts I just mentioned. So this lecture is about using your Quantum Infinity to optimize your brain health. I'm going to be giving you great content that you can use right here, and that's perfect. And then I'll be inviting you, if you want to expand on this and come jump into the webinar series we're having start on Monday, you're welcome to do that as well. And we can go to the next slide. So how do you use your Quantum Infinity? How are you using it? There are so many ways to use the Quantum Infinity. So you can use it for energetic information, but it's not diagnostic. You want to always keep a reality check. You may want to go see a doctor. You may want to go get your labs done, but you can use it for self-assessment, for self-empowerment, to clear and balance things that you discover, and you will notice that you do feel shifts and changes from doing this. We can go to the next slide. All right. Brain health. Oh, you're not going to believe the statistics I'm going to tell you about brain health, or maybe you will. This is something everyone is concerned about. As Susan said, this is the master. If we don't have the brain, really, we can get a little sluggish in our adrenals and our thyroid and so forth, but the brain is really where our personality, our creativity, our service in the world springs forth. from this magnificent brain. So what if I could help you to understand your brain better and then use your quantum infinity to utilize this newfound information and find out how your brain is doing, and then create balance, wellness, and even optimal performance and focus from there. That's where we're going with this. We can go to the next slide. All right, so in the United States, and I know we have people from all over the world, and there are actually similar statistics in different, a lot of parts of the Western world. 1 in 8 seniors in the United States will develop Alzheimer's in their lifetime. And then we have the people who are on the older part of, the spectrum, but then we have the people who are on the younger end of the spectrum, and we have a similar statistic that 1 in 8 children will develop something with their brain, including autism and ADHD. And gosh, if you're a parent or you know someone in your community, if it's not your child, who has autism or ADD, it's so prevalent, or ADHD, they're slightly different. Worldwide, 24 million people have some form of dementia, including Alzheimer's. But here's the thing, you guys, the figure is expected to double every 20 years until 2040 at least. When you see these statistics, we want to ask ourselves, what are we not doing right? There is no reason that human beings need to suffer like this. These statistics should cause us to pause and say, perhaps there's a reason for this. Perhaps there's something preventative we can do now so this doesn't continue to happen. And if you thought that to yourself or have thought it in the past, you're right. And we have new research about the brain that tells us we know 10, 20, sometimes 30 years in advance before someone gets Alzheimer's or someone gets Parkinson's, and now we can recognize those early changes in brain function. For our younger folks, we can start to look at a better understanding about how their brain is functioning and what some of the toxic causes and causes in their environment that have led to their brain issues. We can go to the next slide. So we have other signs of poor brain health on the rise. We talked about the older people. We talked about the younger people. What about the people in the middle? If you have sleep issues, if you have problems thinking clearly, if you forget where you put the car keys, if you have chronic mild depression, or you have mood swings, you guys, sometimes this isn't a hormonal issue or a neurotransmitter issue or an adrenal issue. What I really want to let you know is that often it's a brain issue. There are misfirings, toxicities, issues in the brain that are now causing the brain not to work correctly, and these are the early signs. If we're able to recognize them as such, then we can start to take action now to optimize brain function and stay healthy for many years later, for many years into the older part of our life. And as you know, antidepressants are the second most commonly prescribed, as you may know, medication in the United States and in many other Western countries. But so this is probably partially due to a brain health issue, and that's what I want to share with you tonight. We can go to the next slide. So as you may have guessed, or you may know, the health of your brain is of the utmost importance. It is the primary place to look to optimize your health. It's what everything else springs forth. How you perceive events in your life is processed through how well your brain is functioning, how much you really enjoy life, your ability to feel and experience pleasure, and your interest in taking part in life has to do with the health of your brain. How you react to certain events, if the slightest change can cause you to just, really be disrupted for a day or more, then this may not be something that has to do with your past emotional traumas. It may be at its core a brain change issue that you can do something about, that you can assist and correct and help to optimize your focus, your reactions, your ability to stay calm, your enjoyment of life, your memory, right? Your creativity. All of these things are brain issues. So preservation of brain health is really crucial. We can go to the next slide. So really, we want to say, in response to the statistics, those don't have to be static statistics, and we don't have to be one of those statistics. There is no need now to sit back and wait until we go to the doctor and the doctor says, you're in the early stages of Alzheimer's. We can do something now to say, you know what, I'm a little bit more fuzzy than I used to be. I can't remember where I put the car keys. Sometimes when I park the car somewhere, I don't even remember parking the car. So, malls and shopping centers and so forth. And these are signs that the brain is changing, that we want to take action on today. So there are many things that we can do once we understand how the brain works to prevent things, to prevent those changes, which will not be as changeable 20 years down the line. Then things are much more difficult to deal with once that diagnosis is there. So we want to really deal with issues like depression and brain fog, get to the root of them. Both understanding your brain and using your quantum infinity can help you to get to that place. And so that is where the excitement is at. We can go to the next slide. So basically, you can take action. Understand how your brain works, the different parts of the brain. What do they do? What are some of the important chemicals in the brain? Things like BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. That's a really important one we're going to talk about. And something called eNOS. That has to do with the nitric oxide in your brain. That's nitric oxide synthase that makes sure that you get the proper nitric oxide in your brain. So you can test yourself with your quantum infinity, see what's misfiring, what's working well, and then of course anything that you can define, anything that you can name can be balanced. So we can be very grounded, and we can use biofeedback and nutrition and actually special brain exercises that have been proven to help to improve your cognitive function now, how you function, how you focus, how you remember things, and extend the health of your brain into your later years. You can go to the next slide. So when we're thinking about how do I make sure that my brain is healthy, these are the basic components that we will keep coming back to, and they're really good to keep in mind. A healthy brain, now this shouldn't be a surprise, we need the proper amount of oxygen, but think about it, just breathing normally and sitting around like a couch potato actually is not going to give you the proper amount of oxygen to your brain that you really need. So we're going to talk about that, because there are certain types of consistent exercise and intensity of exercise that help you to achieve that good oxygen saturation in your brain. And there's also appropriate nutrition. We often think about, oh, I need nutrition to prevent cancer, or I need nutrition to keep my body, my energy up. I know I need good nutrition, but there's actually nutrition specifically for the brain that we need to be sure. An example would be DHA, the docosahexaenoic acid. If we're deficient in DHA, we take great risk about our brain health because it is integral in the structure of the brain tissue. We must have it in order to relay the signals properly. We must avoid or reduce inflammation. Inflammation is one of the biggest problems. It's one of the biggest threats to brain health. So we want to discover whether we have inflammation. Then we want to investigate about what are the causes of inflammation that we're dealing with. Do I keep eating the same food allergy that is causing chronic inflammation in my body? that can affect my brain. There's something called leaky gut, which happens often from eating food allergens like gluten, and that can lead to this sounds funny, but it can lead to leaky brain. And that leads to an inflammatory process, which, as benign as wheat toast appears to be, long term, that leaky gut, leaky brain, chronic inflammation can contribute to degenerative brain conditions. Toxins in the environment are affecting our brain. Heavy metals and the dental fillings, things that are in our water, things that we're breathing, those are most definitely affecting our brain health, and we want to be sure we're avoiding some of those toxins or detoxifying the body or protecting the body in some way from being exposed to those toxins. Like milk thistle is an example of that. If you take milk thistle on a daily basis, it helps you to better process toxins you're exposed to. The brain, just like our bodies, need stimulation on a regular basis. That means reading, discovering, learning new things. One of the best things they've discovered you can do for your brain is to learn a musical instrument. But there are different things you can do. Obviously, when we flip this around, and something I don't suspect anyone on the line tonight does, is sitting in front of the TV for hour after hour, night after night, and again, I don't think any of you do this, is one of the worst things you can do for your brain, because that passive attention just deteriorates the brain because it's not being used and it's not really being stimulated. We can go to the next slide. I know somebody out there is thinking, well, what about public television? So if it's a compelling show that causes you to think, it can be very helpful. But there are specific exercises for memory and focus and reaction time, which all help to stretch and stimulate the brain in very dynamic ways, which are important for longevity and optimal brain health. So the truth is about getting Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, these degenerative brain conditions can be detected early. We need to exercise the brain regularly. We need to get proper oxygenation to basically correct these brain changes. We need to get proper nutrition. So these three things are the things we can do if there are early signs. Because if I say to you, if you don't remember where your car keys are, that could be a sign of early brain changes. You might get nervous and be like, oh my gosh, what can I do? This is what you would do. You'd exercise your brain regularly with these brain exercises, get proper oxygenation, get proper nutrition, and learn more about how the brain works and how you can utilize your quantum infinity to achieve balance in your brain. You go to the next slide. So as I said, understanding the brain is important because what you can understand, you can take action on. And interestingly enough, what you can understand cognitively, you can plug into those customized categories and test for. So there's a real parallel, interesting parallel there. So we can go to the next slide. We're going to get into a little bit more of what's going on. These are the areas of the brain. And in the brain, so as I said, if we could understand the brain anatomy and what's going on with the brain, then we could test our own brain and see what is out of balance there. So for this person, I call your attention particularly to the hypothalamus and the pituitary. This is a perimenopausal woman who, with hot flashes and so forth, you'll see that the HPA axis, the hypothalamus and the pituitary, are often out of balance. And so by balancing them and doing things to support them, that is probably the root cause of why they're having their menopausal symptoms more than being down in the ovaries. So this is where we go back to what is the root cause of those symptoms. Now we're able to explore the brain and say, you know what, this is a top-down issue. This is happening more at the hypothalamus and pituitary, so why don't we treat with nutrition and energetic balancing in the right place? We can go to the next slide. This is an interesting slide, which is a friend's mother 71-year-old woman with advanced Alzheimer's. And we were able to test her and see how she's doing because she's really in those deteriorating stages. And you can see that the hippocampus and the temporal lobe, the way I check for imbalances, if you're not familiar with this or if you're just getting your feet wet, is I consider imbalances energetically for the quantum infinity to be over 600, although your official instructions say 650. I found 600 to be relevant, and then under 150 as sort of outliers, places where we're finding imbalance. And so you can clearly see the temporal lobe and the hippocampus. The hippocampus is within the temporal lobe, and both of these things begin to not fire correctly in Alzheimer's. This is the place where the destruction starts, where the deterioration starts. You've heard about the amyloid plaques and things like that. And these have to do with short-term memory, understanding the nuances. You can be able to hear, but you may not be able to interpret the subtleties of the language. So memory, processing, those types of things. And you can look how the hippocampus and the temporal lobe for her are out of balance. And look at that frontal lobe. So that's going to be more advanced Alzheimer's, when that frontal lobe, that ability to organize, make proper decisions, um, uh, to have a proper, something we're going to talk about in a minute. Actually, when the dopamine levels in the frontal lobe get too low, you have serious depression, mood changes, the mood changes we sometimes see with Alzheimer's. And this is interesting, I don't know if you've ever heard of sundowner syndrome with Alzheimer's. What happens with this frontal lobe is when it's not working to a great degree, the circadian rhythm becomes very disrupted. And so with Alzheimer's, you hear of sundowner syndrome, they become very active at night. And so their circadian rhythm is flipped. They're not as active during the day, but they feel like they could just stay up all night. And so that is a sign of imbalance in the frontal lobe. We can go to the next slide. This is a 78-year-old woman. You see some issues in her basal ganglia, and that would definitely be of concern because those could be preliminary. She doesn't have it yet, but those could be preliminary signs of Parkinson's. So we want to know if there's starting to be deterioration in the basal ganglia before we see symptoms. So we may want to look at dopamine levels because the basal ganglia produces dopamine. We may want to ask her some questions because there are some things about Parkinson's. There are early signs with Parkinson's, like changes in the handwriting, something called micrographia, where they start to sign their names smaller and smaller and smaller, and that may be starting to change. There are changes in her frontal lobe. One of the things she says the most is that she's overwhelmed by the things she has to do. So the frontal lobe has to do with processing information. And also the pituitary. So again, anything going wrong with her thyroid or her adrenal is probably going to be rooted in her pituitary. And I just noticed this now, but we have the same exact number for hypothalamus and pituitary, and those go hand in hand. Hypothalamus and pituitary are very connected, and we often talk about the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary axis, as being the root cause for adrenal issues, thyroid issues, or reproductive hormonal issues. We'd like to start at the place where the problem is instead of treating all the way downstream. So this is a great way to know what the root cause is. And we can go to the next slide. All right. So as I said, we saw with the 78-year-old, her basal ganglia was out of balance. And I just want to tell you a little bit about the basal ganglia, because this is something that the deterioration of it leads to Parkinson's. And so this has to do with your fine motor control, cognition, your ability to learn things, emotions. If you're very, you fly off the handle quickly, changes in emotions are important to look at because they mean often changes in the brain. Learning, ability to learn is also, their basal ganglia has to also do with this. We can go to the next slide. There's a little bit more here about the basal ganglia that I want to tell you about. because here are some early changes with Parkinson's. People who twitch their legs at night, sort of in the middle of the night, twitching their legs, that doesn't mean you have Parkinson's. You may just have restless legs, but we can start to put together a pattern. Nervousness, restless mind. If someone looks at you and they say, oh, you always look so serious, actually that poker face, not moving the facial muscles, there's a connection between the facial muscles and moving them and actually the function of the basal ganglia. And the voice actually gets more and more quiet. But these are changes that are happening quietly in the background that nobody recognizes it until, the Parkinson's person can't walk properly, has trouble just walking down, they're walking in their house. They can't keep their balance and so forth, or they have that really stiff posture. So there are changes that we're going to be talking about in this webinar series that are the early signs of brain changes that you can recognize now and take action on. Next slide. So here's just, I just wanted to give you back the, if you were thinking about these, this is just the pictures again that we looked at with the basal ganglia, 78-year-old woman, and her frontal lobe having issues, and her hypothalamus and her pituitary. We can go to the next slide. And also another one, just so you could see issues with the cerebellum, has to do also with a lot of processing of information and learning, but also balance. And I want you to think about this, because when you see that cerebellum out of balance, it's really good to go do yoga or things, even maybe some qigong, I'm not sure, anything that challenges your balance. Where you have to stand on one leg, that will really help. Anything stretching that works the muscle spindles will help to make your cerebellum work better. Something like 50% of people over the age of 50 cannot get balance. They can't stand on one leg for more than 5 seconds or something because they don't practice it. So this is all about doing things now and taking really great action to prevent these unfortunate consequences afterwards. We can go to the next slide. Okay, so we saw some imbalances with the temporal lobe, like for our Alzheimer's woman. And so if you see temporal lobe come up as out of balance on your quantum infinity, then you want to think about issues with long-term memory, verbal memory, language comprehension, decreased auditory perception. So one of the things with Alzheimer's is if there's scatter or background noise going on, they really have a problem hearing and understanding what you're saying. That's a first sign of brain changes. So these are some of the first parts of deterioration associated with Alzheimer's. Don't you want to know these things, right? Let's do something about this. We can go to the next slide. So again, this, like as I said, with the temporal lobe, you could have in a crowded place, in a bar or something, when somebody's talking, if there's scatter noise, not excessively loud, we know you're going to have trouble hearing someone, but you could have trouble really understanding someone's, hard for you to filter out the scatter noise. Any tinnitus, buzzing in the ear, disinterest in music, just the melodies don't sound and are not comprehended in the same way, so they're not as interesting. Familiar faces, finding the words. Okay, this is definitely an early sign, you guys. Have you ever reached for something, you're like, oh, and then you just, and it takes a second? That's a change in the brain. Remembering events of the past, that's also a temporal lobe issue. Next slide. And also in Alzheimer's, the hippocampus is affected. So I thought I'd just name some of these since you saw them out of balance in the slides, and you might be wondering, well, what if I see those? What's coming up? And of course, we'll be talking in much more detail about these and strategies to balance them, because we're going to piggyback some different strategic frequencies like some neurotransmitters and some things to reduce inflammation. We're going to be very creative and create some strategies for balancing the brain. So the hippocampus is involved in the formation of new memories. The hippocampus actually is part of the limbic system. It includes the hypothalamus, the hippocampus, the amygdala, and a few others. It's related to the sense of smell. Now, who recently has read that one of the first ways to know that you are possibly in the process of developing Alzheimer's is the loss of sense of smell? And this is in the hippocampus, one of the areas of the brain that ends up being affected by the amyloid plaques and the problems with Alzheimer's. So anxiety, we know that people have emotional changes in the first stages of Alzheimer's. And again, we can see some of these little threads, 10, 20 years, this is when they start to take place. That is where we can do our balancing and our nutrition and our exercise, and that is the best place. And that's where we can prevent and really have longevity of brain health. Next slide. And again, just so you could see what that example was, I'm just showing you these again just because who can remember from 3 slides back, right? So the cerebellum, and you can see that the hippocampus is out of balance, and you can see that temporal lobe out of balance at 114 because the hippocampus is in the temporal lobe. So isn't that cool that you see both of them coming up as being expressed as being out of balance? All the lobes are part of the cerebral cortex, which has to do with information processing in the brain and planning and organizing. So planning and organizing is something that's real difficult for you. We may be able to do some balancing and strategizing to help to improve that, improve focus, improve memory. Those are things we're going to be talking about. And you know, we're going to be talking about using that really awesome brainwave part of the quantum infinity. We're talking about what the brain waves mean. In the next slide, please. So here's how to prevent changes in the brain which are less than excellent and certainly not what we want. We want to learn to recognize the early changes. We then want to understand harmful biochemical responses in the brain, how they're happening, how they're being expressed as anxiety, depression, difficulty in focusing, brain fog. Those are all usually a result of biochemical changes in the brain. We want to learn how to properly oxygenate the brain, and we want to learn the nutrition that's really necessary for good brain health. So this is how we prevent and achieve optimal brain health. Next slide. And biochemical changes in the brain, they can be from toxins or lack of nutrition or lack of oxygen. And they damage the mitochondria, which is the powerhouse of the brain that produces ATP or energy in the brain. The damage of the mitochondria can produce something called peroxynitrate. And we're going to talk more about this. And that peroxynitrate that happens from the either toxins or nutritional damage will cause DNA damage, breakage in the brain. So, hey, we want to know about that. It's caused by lack of nutrition, oxygen, water, and the accumulation of toxins in the brain. So if we can sort of catch this early and stop getting, stop the toxins, detoxify, if we can understand this process and do something about it, we can really help to preserve brain health. So this is all part of prevention. Go to the next slide. So as an example, this is a panel that I started because I'm sort of completing all of the pieces because we start next week, next Monday, and I also have a section on Tuesday mornings. I'll tell you more about that if you're in the States, or it's 6 o'clock GMT if you're over on the other side of the pond, as they say. So these are concepts that we're going to be talking about, and you see that peroxynitrate at 168, and you see the mitochondria at 120. This person is probably having some toxic exposure that is affecting the mitochondria in their brain, leading to brain fog, depression, confusion, not able to find the car keys. We want to know about that. There's also something called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and this is also out of balance for them. So that means they're probably not oxygenating their brain properly, and they're not giving their brain enough stimulation. The BDNF nourishes the neurons and helps the neurons to be healthy and to expand. And we see that eNOS, the nitric acid synthase. So again, the brain is not being oxygenated. I'm actually going to tell you about these in the next slides. And autophagy is not that high. It's just highlighted because it's one of the higher numbers, but that has to do with the proper cleanup process in the brain. And so there's some metabolic waste in the brain right now that could cause damage. So we're going to talk about how to correct that. Next slide. So I won't elaborate too much on these, but I just want to give you some flavor of what they are because they were out of balance on the slide, and they're ways that you learn about how your brain is functioning. So the BDNF, the brain-derived neurotrophic factor, you need proper oxygen, you need high intensity exercise, and you need proper nutrition. So the BDNF promotes neuron growth, it stops the neurons from dying, and low levels of BDNF are associated with depression. And you also need stimulation of the brain for BDNF to flourish, to be produced properly. Next slide. And then there's the ENOS, right? The ENOS. I'll get to that in a second. Here's the BDNF. High stress depletes the brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Poor nutrition means you don't have enough BDNF. Poor oxygenation, blood sugar imbalances. And you guys, I really want to call your attention to this. This is interesting. Have you heard that Alzheimer's is considered to be diabetes type 3? So here's the beginning stages. You have these blood sugar imbalances that possibly depleting the brain-derived neurotrophic factor is part of that pathogenesis of the illness. And if we can correct this, we want to be very careful to take good care, not too much of the carbs and the gluten and things like that, and really get our blood sugar dialed in for the longevity and optimal health of our brain. We can go to the next slide. So the ENOS, the ENOS, which is the nitric oxide synthase, what's helped to facilitate that nitric oxide in our brain. This is something that helps to expand, vasodilate, open up the brain. Have you ever taken ginkgo and you're, oh my gosh, you feel like you can think so much more clearly? It's because ginkgo helps with that dilation. It helps with the production of the nitric acid and nitric oxide, and that helps with the transmission of messages in the brain. What else do we want to do in our brain but transmit these proper messages? And so the nitric oxide, some of these supplements that help to enhance the nitric oxide, they help you to think so much more clearly. And so this ENOS really facilitates the healthy blood flow in the brain. Next slide, please. So reductions in ENOS have serious consequences. Now you can put ENOS into your quantum infinity and test yourself to make sure. See now how you do after you do exercise. Does your ENOS number change? So reductions in cerebral blood flow with too low ENOS. Reductions in your cognitive impairment. Has this ever happened to you where you've been overworking yourself and you don't exercise? You're just a couch potato, you're sitting at your desk for too long, you're like, God, I can't even think clearly. Then you go out, you exercise, you go for a walk, you go for a run, and gosh, you're so much more efficient, you're so much more productive, you're so much more creative. Part of this is because of the ENOS. And if you don't have enough ENOS, you even increase your risk of stroke. So it's something you really want to keep your eye on, you really want to understand. Next slide. And again, that was the picture of the ENOS. We can go to the next slide. And so just to talk a little bit about nutrition and the brain, we need the proper ENOS for the brain. And so things like resveratrol, ginkgo, something called huperzine, which we're going to talk about, and don't take that until we talk about it, vinpocetine, next slide. We're going to go through these quickly. I know we're a little bit behind in time. So then you can test yourself when you understand things that would improve your ENOS. You could test yourself. There are other things in here that decrease inflammation, or Mucuna helps to bring up the dopamine levels. We're going to talk about all of these nutrients, and then you can test yourself. This person really needs vinpocetine, which will help with that ENOS. Go to the next slide. And again, these are the things that increase the enos. So that person had low enos and the vinpocetine tested well for them. Go to the next slide. So it's just concepts. Really, my goal long term is to really connect you with an empowerment to use the quantum infinity with your cognitive knowledge of natural medicine, and not just my categories, but being empowered to create your own. This is an empowerment tool for investigation and then balancing a bridge to creating and reclaiming your own vibrant health, which you're the one who has the power to do this. And this is a bridge to creating that. DHA is an important structural fat in the body, and 97% of omega fatty acids in the brain are DHA. 93% of the fatty acids in your eyes, I'm so sorry, that should say in your eyes, are DHA. And don't you think you better make sure you better get enough DHA for the good vision for a lifetime as well? So DHA is found in fish. These are some of the fish. It's also found in algae. We can go to the next slide. Crucial to function of the adult brain, loss of DHA changes the cell membrane potential and allows a lot of waste to collect in the brain. DHA helps to preserve cognition, and it helps the hippocampus. Remember, that's affected in Alzheimer's. We can go to the next slide. And I am going to go through these a little bit fast, but you really start to get the flavor of how empowering it is to know about the brain. Go to the next slide. You can see there the DHA was very imbalanced for that person. Then vinpocetine has been studied really well to improve that enos. It has antioxidant benefits. It's really great to take vinpocetine before you give a talk like this one and really get all that oxygen circulation in your brain, be an amazing speaker or present something at your meetings. So it's good to know these little tricks to optimize your performance. Go to the next slide. And again, this other person that was tested, vinpocetine, was very important for them. And butcher's broom does something similar in helping brain function. It increases the enos in the brain. Go to the next slide. And huperzine, don't take this, just go out and get some of this because there's a few things you need to know about it, but in the right dose, careful to take the right dose. It's very, very powerful, and it can help to protect you. If you have a relative that had Alzheimer's, you want to know about huperzine because it can really protect you from getting Alzheimer's. Huperzine actually increases nerve growth and improves your REM sleep. It's really good for improving something called acetylcholine, which is a very, very important brain chemical that will help to improve your performance, your ability to focus, your ability to learn, your ability to concentrate, and so forth. So we're going to talk about that acetylcholine, which is deficient in a lot of people. Go to the next slide. And again, we see we're able to then go and test. What I love about the quantum infinity is we can know a lot intellectually, but let's also test energetically. And then let's come together and put both of those pieces into something that's very rational and grounded. And this just really makes for some of the most cutting edge therapy and cutting edge breakthroughs for your own self. Next slide. So again, I want you to be encouraged to understand your own brain, to understand the early signs of changes in your brain. I want to share with you important brain exercises and memory games. And I'm going to tell you about some of the free apps and low-cost apps that are out there that have been shown, proven in sort of university studies to make important changes in brain function that last some 10 years or more out and can really preserve brain health. We want to talk about important nutrition for the brain and how to properly oxygenate the brain. Go to the next slide. So use your quantum infinity. I want to teach you how to use your quantum infinity for brain health. Test and balance. You can do this yourself as well. You can get the brain anatomy in there, test it and balance it, learn about the biochemical changes, test them and balance them. Anything that can be defined can be balanced, even if you don't really understand it. You can't hurt yourself by balancing it. It's all energy. brain nutrition, learn about that huperzine and the vinpocetine, test it and balance it. And then what's going to be really fun is we're going to learn about the brainwave program in the Quantum Infinity and really go through the alpha, the delta, the beta, the theta, and really learn how to test and balance yourself and improve your cognitive performance by doing that, which is going to be really, really fun. Go to the next slide. And again, this is just a review, just to show the brain anatomy again. This is just an example of what I just talked about. You could, for example, test your brain anatomy. Go to the next slide. Then you could test how your brain biochemistry is doing. This is just an example of what I just showed you in that previous slide. So first I'm going to check my anatomy and draw some conclusions because now I understand it better. And then I'm going to check my functioning, my biochemical functioning. I'm going to draw some conclusions. Whoops, looks like I need to go do a few more runs and go to yoga class a little bit more often. Go to the next slide. And then I can test for which nutrition, right? Because I want to do some exercises and stretch my brain and stimulate it and do some physical exercise. But I also maybe want to supplement with some important remedies that could be helpful to maximize my brain function and preserve my brain for a long time. Go to the next slide. So people, and again, parent, I apologize. People often want to know, how can I help an aging parent? How can I help my child's brain function? Or how can I maximize my own memory, my mood, my level of focus, and more? So usually people are thinking about these things. What can I do to help my parents because they're aging? I have this child with autism or ADHD, and gosh, you know what? I need some help here. What can I do? So this is going to address all of these concerns, which are very important concerns and on the minds of a lot of people. We can go to the next slide. So use all of the following to achieve your goals for preserving and optimizing brain health. Your Quantum Infinity, balancing, nutrition, brain exercises, and the right kind of physical exercise. So we're going to talk about sort of balancing exercise with yoga, but also high intensity exercise. We can't just do a little jog through the park to get that ENOS up, you guys. The studies show it has to be high intensity, short bursts. So a sprint and then a rest and then another sprint. That's the way you do it to really get those chemicals up there. So the results of understanding this and doing something is going to be to enjoy good brain health for life. And then you can share this information with friends, family, and clients, and help them too. That's the ultimate that I think a lot of us really want. We can go to the next slide. So if you enjoyed this and you'd like to know more about it and you'd like to join us, we have some very fun, easy to understand trainings. If you've never done any natural medicine, it does not matter. I'm going to break down the concepts and make them very available to you. I basically teach advanced trainings. We're going through 12 levels. We've been through 4, which are all recorded and available for you if you'd like to get any or all of those levels about the adrenals and digestion and nutrition and bone health. But this also stands alone. So if you'd like to join us for the Brain series, it stands all on its own. We can go to the next slide. And we're going to be starting. We're going to jump into this information and expand on what we learned tonight and put it into a practical, really make it real for you. Give you the categories, and there's going to be an expansion on the categories that we did tonight. Give you the categories so that you can play with this and then really give you everything you need to know that will help you to balance in a very strategic and creative way. They start next week, the 31st, Mondays at 5 p.m. Pacific. And if you're over in Europe, you can join us on Tuesdays at 6 p.m. GMT, or any United States person is welcome wherever you are. The Tuesday morning is 10 a.m. Pacific, or that would be like 12 p.m. Central. So join us if you want to on Tuesdays if Monday nights don't work. You'll understand how everything works, the crucial natural medicine concepts, and then we'll combine it to create really fun strategies for your quantum infinity. Next slide. So please do jump in and join the fun. It is called Level 5 of certification, but it's totally standalone. No previous coursework or knowledge of anything medical or natural medicine is required. All you need really is your quantum infinity and a desire for your brain to work better. So the first 4 modules of the certification are available for self-study. That's the first 4 levels, but you don't need to do them if you don't want to. But from this series and the past series, everything is recorded. So for this brain series, if you can't make something or you don't like the times, you're going to get a recording of it, and you can do it at your own pace. Next slide. So I'm going to go through these quickly. You can read more about them on the website. I'm just going to say one sentence about each of them. The first one is about brain health basics and early signs of brain dysfunction. So everything we talked about tonight, recognizing when you leave the car keys, can't remember where they are, etc., you're starting to notice brain fog, mood changes, we're going to identify those and tell you what's happening and what you can do about it. So that's the first week. And then next slide. In the second week, or the second webinar, we're going to talk all about autism and attention deficit disorder. What does the research tell us about what caused it? Can we use biofeedback and the brain balancing program to help these kids and adults? And what are the important toxicities to be aware of that these kids might have been exposed to? And how can we help their neurotransmitters? So we're going to talk about that so we can see some real changes in our autistic and our ADD kids. Next slide. And then in the third webinar, we're going to talk about Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. They are so prevalent. There's so many people who ask me about them. What are the early signs? What are the toxic exposures? And what can we do for the people who have Alzheimer's and also to prevent it? So we're going to go deep into those amyloid plaques and the shuffling gait and everything and really break it down so fewer and fewer people have to ultimately suffer these. We don't want that. We want to prevent this, and it is preventable. Next slide. And then in the fourth one, it's all about improving, maximizing your cognitive performance. So we're really going to get in there and help you to be better at whatever it is that you do. So we're going to balance the brain, we're going to get into the alpha, the delta, the theta, and we're going to learn nutrition and strategies to increase your concentration and your memory. Next slide. So you've got 4 webinars. They're all recorded. You get my categories exported to you, which is delicious. You can start playing with them. You get a case review so you can see what it looks like in a case. And at the end of our series, we have a really fun celebration of learning video chat session where everybody sees each other and gets to talk to each other about what they're doing with their quantum infinity. So next slide, it really builds community, and we've had some great sessions so far with that. And we also have a closed Facebook community for people in the class to talk to each other and share information. This was a testimonial from someone who is in the UK section. It's really fun. The class is really fun and engaging. I guarantee you're never bored. We have case reviews and volunteers at each session, so you can always get in there with your own health. And then, like I said, we have a celebration of learning at the end. Next slide. So I just really invite you to jump in, give it a try. Call me if you want to get in on this. And next slide. I just want to make sure you have the information. So it's very simple. You can contact me at ariel@awakentotalhealth.com, or you can just go to bit.do/brain, bit.do/brain. You'll be taken right there. Next slide. And go ahead and email me. Next slide when you have a chance. Go ahead, if you liked these categories, email me, and we can go to the next slide, Ariel@awakentotalhealth.com, and I'll send you a panel, whichever one you like. Do you like brain nutrition? Do you like brain anatomy? Do you like the mini health assessment? And I'll go ahead and send you one panel from tonight's webinar so you can go ahead and start testing yourself. Or just contact me to say, hi, Ariel at Awaken Total Health, ask me questions about the class if you're sort of on the fence or you want to know more. But Ariel at Awaken Total Health, you can go to awakentotalhealth.com and see more about that, or you can go to bit.do/brain, and then the whole bunch of information comes up for you. And next slide. So thanks a lot, you guys. I know that was a lot of information, but I hope it really helped you. And enjoy using your quantum infinity. It is beyond amazing. It does create miracles. And take care of your brain, that should say. And it's really your link to good health. All right, thanks you guys, and I think we're going to have Susan come back here. So Susan's I think she's on her way back. I'll just talk until she comes in. Do email me for your panels, and do email me if you have questions. I'd love to connect with you. If you just have questions about your quantum infinity, about the brain or something, just I'm pretty easy to talk to, so you can email me, Ariel at awakentotalhealth.com. So I think Susan's trying to get her sound back here.
There.
And,
Made
yeah,
it.
okay, great.
Okay. Boy, am I glad I was on mute. Okay. We have some questions. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Go right ahead.
okay. Okay. Let me look here. Are there any expanded info on water energize on the toxicity stress panel? Did that
I think that's a question for you.
Are there any expanded info on water energize on the toxicity stress panel? I'm sorry, not connecting into that question. Do you connect into that?
I don't totally understand it. Maybe they can elaborate or clarify.
Okay. How can I customize panel inserting brain anatomy in brain health mini panel?
Oh, if you email me, I'll send you the instructions about how to import. There's a video about how to import categories, and I'll send that to you. And once you see that, you can send me your serial number, and then I can send that to you.
Okay. And there's a question here about the apps that you mentioned for brain exercises.
Mm-hmm.
They want to
Well,
know
we'll be
about them.
talking about those. Yeah, we'll totally be talking more about them in the webinars, but those would be things like Brain HQ or Lumosity would be two examples, and we're talking about which ones what are the ones that are the most effective. But those would be two you can go and look at and investigate on your own.
Okay. Let's see. We have thanks, great job, awesome. Written anywhere? I don't understand that question. And the next one is okay. I don't understand that. So it looks like this is it. Okay. So this has been awesome, everybody. And I urge you to take this class. The brain is foundational. And if you take all the series, that's wonderful. But the brain is seriously foundational. So be aware, get on board, and let Dr. Ariel upgrade your brain. Okay. Thank you so much for tonight. Really appreciate it. And same time, same station next week, everybody.